Well, hi, everyone. I guess I'll introduce. I'm Rhonda Stuller. I live in New London. I'm Secretary of Medicare for All Connecticut, and I've had a busy day actually, but welcome to everyone. And I don't remember, I think it was about a year or so ago that Logan Martinez spoke at one of these meetings. So that video is online on our YouTube channel. If anyone decides they want to refer back to it, he was speaking about, the national program. So I guess I'll do a brief introduction. We have two guests today. Dr. Well, can I call you just Dr. Zach?
Sure, that's fine. I'll answer to all kinds of things.
Is a professor of social welfare policy and community organization at SCSU in the Department of Social Work. He has experience with social justice movement activism going back to the 80s, including work for university disinvestment in the South African apartheid system. He's currently involved in a variety of efforts focusing on social and economic justice, most significantly, the National Jobs for All Network affiliate group working in Connecticut. And as I mentioned, Logan Martinez spoke to this group probably either earlier this year or late last year. Along with a group of colleagues concerned about the social work response to abuses by police, he helped form the state chapter of the Social Welfare Action Alliance, a longstanding organization of radical social workers, in 2020. As an active member of the Connecticut State University chapter of the American Association of University Professors, he works to organize colleagues to combat the trend towards neoliberalism in higher education. Good luck with that. Along with Jennifer Perez, who is not here tonight, Master of Social Work, Sariana Sabaris,
that was good. Yeah,
has been hired by the National Jobs for All Network as an organizer for the Connecticut Jobs and Human Rights Task Force. So welcome to both of you and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. All right, let me share my screen again. Sorry.
Yes, and thank you for that that really fine introduction. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So for those of you who weren't here earlier, we have a little video clip that's right around the beginning of the presentation. So if it's okay with you, I'm gonna just keep this like this size until I get to that slide, and then I'll go full screen if that makes sense. So okay, we are representing the Connecticut Jobs and Human Rights Task Force, which is a part of the National Jobs for All Network. And we're here to talk to you a little bit about the work we're doing, its intersections with healthcare, and we think it's a natural intersection. We hope that maybe you guys will be interested. Sorry, the buttons are right over it. Okay. All right, so this is just a little table of contents for what we'll be talking about. We'll start with a historical grounding, since the program is really grounded in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights, and Zach is an expert on that, so I'm going to let him talk about that part of it, and then we'll tell you what Jobs for All is, and what the task force is, and what we think the intersection and the overlap between the two is.
Okay, so we're moving.
Yeah, so this is going to be the flip. Is that it? Yeah, okay.
So I assume that many of you are familiar with Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights, but just in case, we brought along this fabulous video from his 1944 State of the Union message, which I think sets the stage for what we're going to talk about.
I hope I clicked the the sound option. Let me know if you can hear this.
In our day, certain economic...
Can you hear it?
It's good.
It's good? Okay.
...proofs have become accepted as self-evident. A second Bill of Rights under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed. Among these are the right to a useful and remunerative job, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every farmer to raise and sell his products at a return which will give him and his family a decent living, the right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom, freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home or abroad, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, the right to a good education. All of these rights spell security. And after this war is won, we must be prepared to move forward in the implementation of these rights to new goals of human happiness and well-being. For unless there is security here at home, there cannot be lasting peace in the world.
Okay,
You wanna,
so you're going to shift back to the presentation now, right?
yeah, but is there anything you want to say about the clip?
Well,
think-
I would simply say that, as I said, that was from Roosevelt's 1944 State of the Union message. It essentially represents in many respects the unfinished agenda of the New Deal, which was to guarantee what we would today call economic human rights. And obviously, the right to health care was one of those. But the most fundamental right that Roosevelt and the Roosevelt administration conceived it, the one from which, as the founder of the National Jobs for All Network, Trudy Goldberg, tells us frequently, was what Roosevelt saw as the most fundamental, the one on which others would which would set the foundation for the achievement of these other economic human rights, was the right to employment. And so our work in Connecticut and in the National Jobs for All Network particularly is very much based in this kind of framing. And we believe that, as the slide suggests, this was on the agenda at one time in our history, and it potentially can be again. The general perspective of the National Jobs for All Network is establishing jobs guarantees using federal government direct job creation, which is different from other approaches to full employment practiced by those who often are referred to as Keynesian economists, who want to use government money to stimulate private sector employment. We believe that that jobs should be guaranteed through the federal government using direct government job creation mechanisms. And as you can see here, it is clearly something that was once on the agenda of our country, and we can certainly put this on the agenda again. Could we have the next slide? Sorry.
Sure.
So, in this time period, right, over 1 in 7 we're below this poverty.
This is now, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, nearly one. I'm confused. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No. The word depression is yeah.
Yeah, that threw me off.
No,
Okay.
I'm
So as
sorry.
you can see, I haven't practiced this much, but I've taught about this stuff for years. But the point is that unemployment is a serious problem now. And we see 37 million people living below this artificially low poverty line. Over 1 in 5 American children, and the United States has the highest poverty rates, right? And these are telling statistics that illustrate the need for this kind of human rights strategy to assuring economic security for all. Could we have the next slide, please?
Sure. I was looking for this one because it related to what you were saying as far as our group being grounded in it. This is a quote from Trudy from one of her books. Just basically saying what you said, that our program is grounded in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights, that we conceive of it as a human right. We conceive of work as a human right. And that we think the federal government should create jobs and protect, jobs and our ability to always get jobs at a living wage in a way that isn't just going to stimulate private sector business and not help people. Is there anything else you want to add about that? Or
No, I think I would only say that Gertrude Schaffner Goldberg is the founder, one of the key founders of the National Jobs for All Network, which is the sponsoring organization of our Connecticut Jobs and Human Rights Task Force, of which we're a part here in Connecticut.
Yeah, and that clip that I showed, it was something that I know in your class, Zach, and for those of you who weren't in that class, it was like one of the first things you did in the social welfare history class. You showed it and like had us all imagine how it must have felt to see that on TV and to see the president saying that. And it's really not something we can imagine now. Certainly not in my lifetime. I can't speak for anyone else, but it's really amazing. And like Zach said, we can get back there. It's a matter of believing we can get back there and, pursuing it through policies and through our systems. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to tell you about was the town hall event that we put on in 2021, which is what our task force grew out of. So basically, I was an intern, Zach was my intern advisor, and we put together a town hall. Holly was a speaker. She came representing Medicare for All. She gave an amazing presentation. And we did that. We pulled people from other groups and other work in things like healthcare, the peace movement. I can't remember what else offhand, but we did Medicare or Husky for immigrants. Just a lot of different issues because we thought it was really important to view the intersections between these issues, these other issues that are all natural human rights that should be protected by the government, and to engage different groups and bring us all together and just sort of think imaginatively about what transforming the labor system in this country could do for all these other issues. So from there, a bunch of us, including Holly, we decided to keep meeting afterwards and having these like monthly, I think, or maybe bi-monthly even meetings, which then became the task force over time. And this is just here on the slide is just the goals that Zach and I were trying to achieve with that town hall. Is there anything else you want to add, Zach?
No, I think this was really the kickoff of the Jobs for All work here in Connecticut that, as Sarah suggested, led to our task force that is ongoing as since that time.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Okay. And this is just the slide about our current task force. On here, I said a little bit about this Connecticut bill, SB 151, that was put forward just last year, I think. Yeah, last year. And it was very successful. Like a lot of people came out for it and it really was promising, which was kind of surprising for a full employment thing, because that's pretty controversial in the current climate. But there was a ton of support for it and it looked really promising, but then they kind of like didn't bring it up for a vote, I think, and it died in committee. But it really went to show that that was our first attempt to help lay the groundwork of the infrastructure for full employment at a state level. Because prior to this, I think we're the first state level group in Jobs for All. I don't think they've tried that before. And it's kind of like, it's national legislation, so it makes sense to do it nationally, but it's a big ask. Like, seriously, this bill wants to transform the labor system as we know it, and that's just not going to happen that way. So we decided to try to create a model with this Connecticut group that maybe we can help other states do similar things, and together we can lay the groundwork, and then maybe we can pass the national bill. Whoops.
Yeah, just briefly, I would add, you know, given the federal situation, obviously federal bills are unlikely to move forward. So it was felt by some of us involved in this work that if we could make some progress at the state level to establish the utility of a you know, a government job creation approach, that this would help move the issue forward. And as I said, as Sari suggested, this bill moved much further in the legislative process than we had frankly imagined, even though it wasn't ultimately enacted. But we'll be back at it again quite likely in this legislative session.
Yeah. All right. And this is the last slide. It's just a little bit about some of the reasons why we think this is such a natural intersection and a natural partnership between the push for universal healthcare and the push for this universal job creation program that we want. And the first one is that health insurance and the labor system are tied together because people need to get jobs that give them health insurance most of the time. And so, you know, it's just something that it doesn't really make sense that it's dictated by the labor system, but it is. So the second one is the universal healthcare push, that universal healthcare would empower millions upon millions of Americans to prioritize doing work they love, pursuing projects they might otherwise pass on due to their insurance needs. I don't know how many of you have had the experience of choosing a job just because the insurance they offer will cover something you need. But I know I've been in that situation where I've had to pass on a job I wanted and take one I didn't really, because it was so important that I get coverage. Obviously with a universal non-labor system healthcare option, that would be freedom. The last one was just that adequate medical care and meaningful employment opportunities should both be protected as natural human rights. In the richest country in the world, there are 0 reasons why this should not be the case. Anything else you want to add, Zach?
Only that this, you know, this reflects the interconnection of various examples of economic human rights: right to employment, right to adequate income, the right to economic security in instances of old age, disability, etc., and the right to healthcare, the right to education. All of these things are interconnected, right? And that's certainly how Roosevelt and his administration, I think, thought of these things. And so one of the reasons why we're here tonight is, you know, to talk about how we can collaborate working for economic human rights for all.
Yeah, and we've been talking about maybe having another town hall next year, maybe planning out a town hall. And I would love if Holly would come talk again. Last time we had to cut it short, but this time I would like to make sure we can do a whole presentation with you. And if anyone else is interested in maybe speaking, that would be awesome. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's see. Yep.
Yeah, and actually, we have quite a few questions that have and comments that
cool.
Appeared in the chat. So Madeline notes that just to be clear, neoliberalism calls for government support of private businesses to handle socioeconomic problems. I think that you know, that's correct. What happens is government money is funneled to typically federal government money is devolved to the lowest level of provision at the state and local levels, and then often funneled also to the private sector in a variety of ways. And sometimes direct federal subsidies are used to in a sense as a form of corporate welfare to support corporations in hiring people. We don't believe in that, right? That's an approach that is wasteful, I think. And it amounts to a far less effective way to create jobs, and it tends to be characteristic of a more neoliberal approach. Phil Brewer says another approach would be to reverse the privatization of traditionally public sector jobs. Yeah, absolutely. That's clearly what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
That's, in fact, I would suggest that's one of the most central goals, right? And if you're able to secure a human right to employment, as Sari indicated, this undermines the existing exploitative labor system and puts the corporate leisure class on the defensive, right? And so I think the degree to which we can move this forward is beneficial to all of us, as well as to those of us working for other economic human rights. This jobs for all. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add quickly. I was gonna add that with that, like, there are other like conversations sort of happening around full employment where what they're talking about is stimulating private sector business. And what makes us different than that is we strongly we don't stand for that. Our plan, we have a whole policy plan. It's explicitly, it does not work by stimulating existing private businesses. It's a huge job creation program. So it's actually creating the jobs we need. It's creating green jobs, stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of very strict things in place that would prevent it from being just something that stimulates private sector interests, basically. Go ahead, Zach. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone's familiar with the Civil Works Administration during the Roosevelt administration, that's kind of a model for what we propose. And the person who's probably done the most significant work on this from a sort of an intellectual perspective is Phil Harvey of Rutgers University, who's a professor of law and economics, and is essentially the person who drafted the federal bill, which was called HR 1000, the Humphrey Hawkins memorial. I'm blanking on the name now, but essentially it was sponsored by former Representative John Conyers and introduced in several Congresses over the last decade or so, and that lays out the basic model. Harvey has also written a wonderful report for Demos, which, if you were interested in that, I could certainly provide to you. That's about 10 years old, and but it does lay out in great detail this strategy, which again is a direct government job creation strategy, as opposed to the kind of Keynesian stimulus approach that Sari was referring to.
Thank you.
So I don't know. I'm not seeing more questions. Are there more questions about the task force, the approach, what we're trying to do here?
This isn't exactly a question, but when you talked about the two approaches, it needs to be done federally, but trying to do it state by state as a strategy.
Yeah.
It is really parallel to a lot of discussions in healthcare reform. You have the one payer state people, and you have the other groups that are focused really on federal legislation. And I think the goal is really the same, but I don't know. Do you see that kind of
I
I
think
don't know.
Holly, I think a bit, I mean, maybe I didn't credit her enough. I think Holly was really instrumental in either giving us
Well,
this idea of tackling it this way or of just helping
could
us with
be.
lots of little things based on how you guys do it, like resolutions and stuff. We really used you as a model. So yeah, I should have credited her more for that. And I'm not sure, she might have had a hand in like giving us the idea to even do it this way. I can't remember, but that's likely because she was there since the beginning, you know, and we're the first ones that did it in Connecticut. So I think that would be likely. But yeah, you're right. And it's because we really look up to you guys for that.
Oh my gosh.
Honestly. Yeah.
I mean, I think we all have similar goals in mind, whether we're working to assure a basic human right to health care, whether we're trying to achieve a basic human right to education up to the highest level that one can attain without having to go into horrendous debt. You know, the right to employment, the right to adequate income. There was a question that I answered in the chat about what if people weren't able to work or didn't want to participate in the productive system. Well, you know, this is where the universal basic income proposal, I think, dovetails nicely with the kind of federal job guarantees that we envision. Some people sort of posit full employment and UBI as sort of, you know, competing goals. I certainly don't see it that way, and I don't think the national network sees it that way. These are complementary approaches, right? Essentially, you know, what this is all about, in my view, is, as the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign puts it, you know, the right to live, right? That's what we're working on here collectively. And to speak more concretely about what, in fact, we're sort of coming to you with is we have this task force that we formed called the Jobs and Human Rights Task Force, right? And that's very important. We envision this as an intersectional entity in the state of Connecticut that would bring in people, yes, working on a whole range of issues, right, including healthcare. I see the questions about dialogues with folks working on reparations and carceral reform. We've had some interactions with those folks, but we are looking to bring in, you know, as broad a cross section of the, if you will, the human rights advocacy universe as possible. That's the vision, right? And the idea then, getting back to the state versus federal thing, right? We can build it kind of at the state level, build a strong sort of exemplar organization at the state level, and then build out from there. And I think, yes, it absolutely is modeled to some extent on the one payer states approach. So I don't know, sorry, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, in response to the question about it be like would people be forced to work kind of thing, just that's something that I've heard other people say. I think it's perfectly reasonable to think of that, right, with this, because we're advocating for this like wholesale job creation, but it would never be mandatory. It would never be that anybody would have to work. It would just be that if you wanted to work, you could like go to your local jobs office and be guaranteed a job at a living wage that was adjusted to be a living wage always, with like healthcare, hopefully, as part of that, right? Like you could just do that. That's what it is, really. That's the idea. You wouldn't have to. You could, right?
And you know, if I can speak to that in you know, my doctoral dissertation advisor, Dr. David Gill, spoke about the right of people to develop in actuality what they are potentially. He taught, not surprisingly, with Abraham Maslow at Brandeis University. So he was influenced by this. And to me, that's an important aspect of assuring a right to employment. It's not just, you know, to do something, but to act in the world, to be efficacious, to engage in a free way, not an exploitative way, as under the current economic system, right? And this, this vision obviously undermines existing modes of economic and social organization, and frankly, it's intended to, right? It's not going to be implemented right away, certainly, but this is what we're working towards, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw something in the chat that was that healthcare and jobs need to be separate. We totally agree. I know that slipped out because I'm used to thinking of it as connected, but absolutely, like we absolutely advocate for universal healthcare, and we don't think it should be part of the jobs thing. Just to that.
Can I also speak up on this
Sure.
Universal Declaration of Human Rights? So David Gill also worked extensively on this in terms of trying to use that as a leverage point to promote these kinds of ideas, right? Making the argument that because the Constitution makes treaties with which the United States enters into the supreme law of the land, and since the U.S. has signed the UN Charter by implication, even though it hasn't necessarily ratified the economic human rights that we're talking about, it is still obligated to abide by that, right? Now, obviously, that argument hasn't been politically successful, but in my opinion, this kind of vision needs major social movements and organizational strategies that mobilize large cross sections of the people. Doesn't have to be everybody. I mean, I think the research in political science shows that if you mobilize 10% of the population, you're going to have a major sea change, right? So that having been said, these are tall orders, but I think we need to have a vision of social and economic justice that we're all collectively working on. And, that's sort of the intent, again, of this Jobs and Human Rights Task Force. And yes, indeed, it was chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, the creation of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which is, of course, heavily based on the Economic Bill of Rights that Franklin Roosevelt articulated.
I saw Donna, you've had your hand up. I just wanted to make sure you got a chance.
Thank you. I was trying to articulate a question in the chat, and I figured it's just going to be easy to ask. I'm wondering if you see this, like how you see this fitting into like our current capitalist model, considering that our current model requires an or underemployed class to act as sort of a negative example for others, other workers, to keep them in line and such. How do you see this fitting into our current capitalist model?
We see it as something that's designed to undermine that model.
Yeah.
What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the intent of this. Again, I refer back to Gill, who is really a guiding light for me. The idea was to use these kinds of things as, if you will, transition policies. They are, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this fellow's name, the social scientist Andre Gorz, Gorz. I'm sure that's mispronounced. Talked about what were called non-reformist reforms, right? That is to say, reforms that undermine the existing social order, right? And that's exactly what this is, right? It's an example of that. And of course, that's one of the reasons why, it is incredibly challenging to get these kinds of things enacted, right? I mean, I don't want to be sort of Pollyannish about this. This is sort of an easy road to, we put this before the people and everybody jumps on board. No, clearly it's been a long, neoliberalism, as we were discussing earlier, has significantly undermined many of the much of the incremental progress made in this direction in the middle years of the 20th century, right? Yes, it's a tall order, but I do believe that if we build the kinds of social movements that help force some of the concessions in the New Deal period and the Great Society period, that we can, if we do something like that again, not identical, but something like that we have a chance then to overcome this system of domination and exploitation that is called capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, these things tend to be at least somewhat cyclical, and we're seeing this immense rightward push that we're hoping, if there's any silver lining there. It's that people are getting more interested in leftist causes. And, you know, we want to be ready so that when the day comes when we can actually advance this thing and make it stick, it's perfect and it's done. And we, you know, it's already, to my mind, I'm not a legal scholar, but when I look at the plan, it looks so incredibly detailed and intricate and like foolproof already. Of course, like I said, I'm not a legal scholar, but it's important to us that it's not just like a broad strokes idea. It's a full-fledged plan with all kinds of like local initiatives, successful local legislation already in place that we can point to and say, that's on the books already, you know, so it doesn't feel like just a radical idea, even though it is a radical idea. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and you know, we are our task force has been meeting monthly. We do have a meeting coming up on Tuesday, the 19th.
Good call. Yeah.
At 7:30 p.m. And we're looking for people to join us from various sectors of the social justice movement, right? I think one of the things that guides us is an understanding of the intersection of these movements for economic justice, including the right to a useful and remunerative job, as Roosevelt put it, you know, is essential for the attainment of other elements of the broader struggle for justice that we talk about, right? You know, Martin Luther King, I think, understood this quite well when he said something to the effect of, you know, what good does it do someone to be able to sit at a segregated lunch counter if they can't afford to buy a cup of coffee? We need to assure economic justice in order to create true social justice in society. And, you know, look, over the long term, I mean, I think we need to go further. I think we need a real economic democracy where workers actually are in control of the productive system. I mean, but again, just if you get to even a partial job guarantee, it does exactly, it undermines exactly what you were talking about, what Marx called the reserve army of the unemployed, right? That it makes that, you know, it does away with that. And when it does away with that, obviously it puts the capitalists in a very, you know, untenable position in terms of maintaining their exploitation of the rest of us, right? And, you know, I mean, I'm not mincing any words here. I think someone had said they were part of DSA. I've been a 30-year member of DSA. I was in DSA long before Bernie came along. And so, you know, I believe in that kind of vision. And I think that, that, you know, it does underlie, I mean, it's obviously economic human rights, obviously has kind of a socialistic initiative. And, you know, I don't think we should back away from that, right? I mean, I think one of the things that is very important for us to do is to do what folks, for example, in the LGBTQ++ movement have done in reclaiming this word queer, right? We need to reclaim the positivity of socialism and not let these damn neoliberals you know, co-opt it and use it, you know, like I could go on and on about this, but you know, I recently got red baited in my hometown. I live in a horrible
Wow, really?
not Hamden. No, it's a long story. But, you know, there were some of us who were DSA members who were on our Democratic town committee. And these right-wing Democrats were attacking us for, you know, co-opting, you know, you can imagine what it was. And so in any event, my point is that we need to fight back against that any chance we can. And that's essential. You know, Gil talked about this also. I know I keep going back to him, but, you know, if you're able to shift consciousness, right, of people, then real fundamental change becomes possible. And I think ultimately this movement for jobs and human rights is predicated on helping to promote those kinds of shifts in consciousness. But you have to begin somewhere, right? And the way we begin is we come together. And the Jobs and Human Rights Task Force is intended as a forum to facilitate that. All right, I'm not going to take up too much of the time here.
No, it's important. It's important. I'm glad that you're, you know, clarifying this stuff. We are a radical organization and we are self-consciously radical.
I just have one question, I guess. Have you found that in recent years that so many people are really suffering, particularly in the last 5 years? It seems as though people are struggling with housing insecurity, food insecurity, healthcare insecurity, to an extent that I don't think I've seen it in the past in my, pretty long lifetime. And do you feel as though there's a potential to get people thinking more about systemic change because of it? Or are people just less creative about seeing ways out of the, quandary we're in?
Yeah, Zach touched on this, and something he said before that's always stuck with me is that for those of us who have, mostly known only either conservative leaders or conservative Democrat leaders in this country, it's hard to keep in mind that things are possible. Like, it's really been constricted, our view of what we can do and what's possible. We see it as like the way it's always been, the way it's always going to be, and we just kind of get complacent, or we don't think we can change it, or we give ourselves over to it. And it's a democracy. It's not like a full democracy, but there are still things we can do if, like Zach said, I think it's between 5 and 10% of people to create wholesale change. So yeah, what do you think, Zach?
Well, I think, clearly 40 years of neoliberalism has shaped the consciousness of a large segment of our population, and in the sense that it's limited the horizon of what people think is possible, right? So people have grown up believing that jobs, that they couldn't expect to have a job for their lifetime, or they couldn't expect to have a pension, or that maybe Social Security wouldn't be around. And the way in which neoliberalism has acted as a hegemonic force in shaping people's consciousness is one of its most powerful elements. So what you're talking about, the sort of increasing immiseration of larger and larger segments of the population, which has been partially exacerbated, of course, by the COVID crisis. This creates, in my view, potentially an opportunity for the kind of, broad-scale social change that you saw in the time of the Great Depression and the New Deal period, and again in the 1960s with the Great Society. And again, I've studied these sort of outbreaks. Francis Fox Piven calls these things sort of the big bangs of U.S. social welfare policy. And I think that's true. And if you look at this historically, most of the gains, and granted, they're partial, right? The New Deal is not a panacea, certainly, the Great Society also. However, what if you look at the historical window for significant social change, most of those policies were enacted in a 5-year period in the New Deal period, right? And then in even shorter in the 1960s with the Great Society. The vast majority of the Great Society legislation is passed between 64 and 66, right? So I think what Sari said is extremely important, that, we need to be prepared for when that moment happens and we can make significant progress towards this vision, right? And I am convinced that it will come along, and that we have been doing things. I mean, I think you look over the last 10 years, for example, the emergence of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which I'm proud to say I participated in, right? Black Lives Matter, and other economic justice movement, including a more prominent movement for national health care, right? So, all of these things are portents of a potential move towards a more economically just future. And Holly just noted that I've gotten arrested for these things. Yes, that's right. I was arrested at the Capitol this past summer, standing up against neoliberal Lamont and its horrible budget. Okay, I said it. All right. Anyway, yes, we have to do that kind of stuff. and particularly if you're in a sort of privileged situation like some of us are, you know, with very secure jobs, it doesn't get more secure than a tenured college professor. You know, you're obligated to do that kind of stuff, in my opinion. Anyway, I can go on and on. All right. I'm getting
Well,
excited. Every time I talk about this stuff, I get wound up. All right.
Well, thank you both.
You.
For our last 10 minutes, we should share information about things that are going on locally in our towns within the state. I heard that Phil has an announcement, and others may have things going on in the future as well. But how about you start, Phil?
Thank you. Yeah, Holly, I'm a Physicians for National Healthcare Plan member of long standing. And healthcare is clearly one of these issues that has been completely taken over by the private sector and by the profit sector, and even our federal Medicare program now, over half of the people who get Medicare are actually enrolled in private programs run by private insurance. And so we're trying to, PNHP has been around a long time, but we're revitalizing our Connecticut chapter. We've been working with an organizer from the Metro New York chapter, and also with Holly, reaching out to form partnerships with other organizations that promote healthcare for everybody. And so there's two things that we have on the planning stage. One is to have at least one, and I hope it'll lead to more than one, screening of probably Fix It. There's several documentaries about healthcare for everybody and the problems inherent with private profit-driven healthcare, and so we're planning that. We're in the process of planning that now, and we're shooting for sometime in mid-November to have a screening. And we haven't settled on where to do this. Southern is one place that we thought of. I'm also a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, which is against the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And we've had a number of screenings at the New Haven Public Library of programs for that. So that's one thing that we are going to be reaching out for involvement to try to get action going to get healthcare for everybody, to get the Medicare model, an improved Medicare model that includes dental and the other aspects that aren't included, pharmacy. So you'll be hearing more about that from us, and from us meaning Holly and PNHP and Medicare for All Connecticut. The other thing is, and I'm not really one of the organizers, but there is a people's action that I think is planned for the 11th, in which there's a plan to have a demonstration at Aetna headquarters in Hartford, to protest the incursion of the gradual gobbling up of Medicare by Medicare Advantage. And kind of the sub-theme of that is to try to educate people that in many ways it's actually Medicare disadvantage. But it compares favorably to straight Medicare because of some of the perks that it has that straight Medicare doesn't have. So we have to fix Medicare and take it back from the private sector. So there will be more forthcoming on that as well. End of story.
Thank you.
Very quickly, I'd be very much interested in attending that demonstration if I'm available. So please do.
Same.
Okay. I think Holly, like I said, we are joining in with this movement, but it wasn't our planning to begin with. But we're gonna be involved. So I think we can count on Holly through Medicare for All Connecticut to get the word out.
Excellent.
And,
Thank you.
yeah. And I'm killing her because she wants to talk, and I'm sorry, Holly. Yeah, it'll be better next time.
I'm glad you chose Aetna because state of Connecticut retirees were shifted to Advantage programs about 4 or 5 years ago, and Aetna is the new, in 2023, became our provider for Medicare Advantage from,
Yeah.
which just really galls me.
Yeah.
Patricia also had an announcement she wanted to make before.
Can I just briefly give
Sure.
you one example of the dirty tricks that they do? Because a big emphasis is going to be on the fraud in their billing. So if you have you gotten telephone calls? Oh, we have a nurse practitioner who we want to have come to your home and review your medical. You know why they're doing that? It's because there's a capitation system, and every patient has a complexity rating. And so by sending this nurse practitioner to your home, it has nothing to do with your health. It has everything to do with putting you in a higher complexity ranking, so that instead of them getting 20,000 a year for your health care, they can get 40 or 50,000 a year for your health care. It is a total scam. And it's just one of the many things that they do to milk the system and pay for their yachts and private jets. So, all right, had my little rant.
I know Patricia has to leave, but can you give a 1-minute update on the debt collective?
Yes, yes, I can. So the debt collective, which is for all kinds of debt in different groups, we have a tool out, and that's the link to it. And this tool generates this a letter that is your appeal for different kinds of help depending upon what you put into the tool. And getting everybody to do this is part of the debt collective strike. We're having a strike against student loan debt because we're trying to get it canceled. And in fact, that's the meeting I'm going to, is the 50 over 50 that strike meeting. And the 50 over 50 means people who are over 50, and originally they were looking for 50 people. And quickly, within 2 weeks, they had over 1,000. And then now there's like tens of thousands of people who are over 50 who are participating. And the debt strike isn't default. It's not default. It's everything but default. Do everything you can to not pay your loan. And this tool will actually help in a legal and process way to get the whole thing started. It may tell you, I mean, I haven't heard of anyone saying, oh, it couldn't help me at all, but because there's so much you don't know. And if you have student debt, another place to go, don't go to your servicer, go to studentaid.gov. And if you have any questions, I think Rana has my email, and so you can ask her for it, and I'll be glad to help you through anything. Bye. And thank you for a great presentation. Holly, feel better. Ciao.
Thank you.
And I just put my email address in the chat so that if you want Patricia's email from me, you have mine to ask at. Are there any other quick announcements? It's 8 o'clock, so try to be respectful of everyone's time. We do try to end on time. But if that's it, I'll turn off recording